bad cards, broken cards, boring cards. Just who is running the circus that Wizards of the Coast has become? Hello, angry gamers of the internet, and welcome back to Reactionary Reaction, the only YouTube channel brave enough to ask the tough questions about children's entertainment media. In this episode, the first in a 5-part series, I'll explain why Magic the Gathering is dead, and it's been killed by lazy game designers who continue to print bad cards because of their woke, feminist equality ideology, which...
Stop! You just experienced a reductionist perspective. Hi, I'm Spice8Rack, aka several cleverly disguised Polish women, and welcome back to the channel. I want to explore this question of bad cards in Magic with a little bit more nuance. Like, I'm sure that some bad cards exist in this game that were genuine mistakes, but are all bad cards really just errors on the game's designer's part? To me, there are 3 kinds of bad cards in Magic, which fit very neatly into 3 distinct categories, which I will be naming the good, the bad, and the ugly. What can I say? I'm just a massive fan of film noir. I've not actually seen this movie. Bruce Willis is in it, right?
Oh, sorry, no, you're thinking about RoboCop. Part 1. The good, aka bad cards that are good, actually. Sometimes the true value of a card can be found outside of the quality of its mechanical applications. Let's use Pillarfield Ox as an example. Now, this is a very weak creature for its cost. For 1 white and 3 mana of any colour, you could instead cast anything from Day Squad Marshal, which is just mechanically better, to Basri's Lieutenant, which is obviously mechanically better, to an actual literal god. However, despite being a mechanically worse card than all of these, Pillarfield Ox has seen 4 separate printings and even has a few functionally identical cards to compare it to. Why is this card, and similarly overcosted vanilla creatures, printed so often in Magic? Is it just laziness? A waste of card stock? Is Rupert Murdoch involved? Well, no, and it's only a matter of time. Let's start with why vanilla creatures exist in Magic in the first place. Sam Stoddard, a game designer for Wizards of the Coast, who have a new and awful logo now. Nothing to do with the video, but just recently they had a rebrand, and I'm getting big, legally distinct from Doctor Who IP vibes from this. Anywho, Sam Stoddard discusses the continued existence of vanilla creatures in Magic the Gathering in this 2016 article on the Magic the Gathering mothership.
Vanillas do a great job of setting baseline expectations of how strong each color's creatures are. Blue and red's vanillas tend to be things like Hill Giant, Blind Phantasm, or Goblin Piker, though we have recently started giving red actual grizzly bears to help with limited. White, black, and green are all better creature colors than red or blue, so their vanillas are stronger. If you were a new player and opened up 6 packs of Magic, you would be able to get a pretty good sense of just how powerful each color's creatures are with just the vanillas.
And when you go and crunch the numbers, this holds true. The most inefficient vanilla creature in white, where 4 mana buys you 6 total power and toughness, is actually quite comparable to some of the most efficient vanilla creatures in blue, where 4 mana buys you 7 power and toughness. This is one reason why cards like Vizzerdrix exist. To a new Magic player today, a vanilla 7 mana 6/6 at rare seems like a joke. But when you consider that most of Blue's vanillas are cheap 2/1s or overpriced 1/5s, what this card is trying to teach you is that if you want more bigger creatures for less mana, you should look to play with a different colour. If you want to spend 3 mana and win the game, however, then I've got a couple of islands I can sell you. Every set in Magic sees the printing of a whole variety of creatures and spells with minimal or no rules text. But that doesn't mean that vanilla creatures don't have writing on them. One of the major differences between Magic and almost every other collectible card game I've played, both digital and physical, is the prominence of flavor text. Flavor text is the term given to little splashes of creative writing found on the bottom of cards that serve no direct gameplay function. I've got a whole video about comedic flavor text if you're interested in watching me do a big old deep dive into it. Go check it out, I think it still stands up. Many other games have flavor text, but they are often lousy with grating puns or simple one-liners or dry descriptions that feel like they've just been lifted from a year 9 biology textbook. Yeah, I'm going in on Yu-Gi-Oh! Get your drama buckets ready, because it's time to cancel Blue Eyes White Dragon. In digital games in particular, flavor text is also often hidden behind button presses or in drop-down menus. Magic, however, is the only game that I have played whose flavor text is both prominently featured and which also serves as individual parts of the vast quilt of a set's narrative. The card Elderleaf Mentor won't see any play in any decks outside of Limited and some elf tribal brawl decks, if they even exist. It's not a terrible, awful, bad card, it's just not very good. However, only having 3 lines of rules text leaves room for flavor text at the bottom, and this flavor text in particular, I think, is exceptional.
Our ancestors grew complacent in their divinity, allowing their lessers to topple them. Never again.
If you have any interest in the concept of efficient storytelling, then pay attention to this kind of writing, because you have just been given both the backstory and the current broad motivations of the elves of Kaldheim. Obviously, creatures and spells don't need to have 3 paragraphs of rules text to be good cards. But cards which could have more, yet don't, leave space for this kind of storytelling. I mean, without rules-light cards like Caravan Herdar or multiple reprints of Pillarfield Ox, we wouldn't have ever been introduced to Bruce Tarl, the best non-goblin character in Magic the Gathering. In fact, I'd argue that it wasn't until Pillarfield Ox's 3rd reprint in M14 that the character of Bruce Tarl really caught the player base's attention with this fantastic tirade.
You old immobile clod! If I could stuff your doltish head with knowledge, I'd do it just so someone else could fully comprehend what your stubbornness has cost me. There we are, just recording my normal voice for you there. If you'd like me to do a take in the fake voice I'm talking in now, let me know.
In fact, all but one of Bruce Tarl's flavor text appearances are on cards that you'd likely only ever pick up in Limited, if you'd ever pick them up at all. Obviously, there's nothing stopping most of this flavor text from appearing on quote-unquote good cards, but I just thought this was an interesting thing to note. But if we're looking at reasons why seemingly bad cards are actually good, all of the aspects that I've just talked about only pertain to vanilla creatures, creatures with no rules text, French vanilla creatures, creatures with only keyword mechanics, and Belgian vanilla creatures, creatures that are effectively vanilla or French vanilla after they've entered the battlefield. There are other reasons why cards, and more specifically non-creature spells, that don't really hold up when compared to other cards, keep getting printed. Also, vanilla creatures with enter the battlefield effects are actually called virtual vanilla cards, but fuck you, Belgian vanilla is better. I'm just running with that and you can't stop me. One of the universal truths about game design, specifically for a game like Magic the Gathering, is that cards may be bad in certain environments, but really very good in others. In limited formats, where you have to build decks based on a semi-random selection of cards from 1 or 2 sets, a removal spell that you would otherwise never play suddenly becomes a linchpin for a successful deck. Stoddard uses 2 different removal spells, Throttle and Flatten, as examples. Printed only 1 set apart, these 2 spells perform the exact same action for 2 different mana costs. But this wasn't a mistake or laziness on the design team's part. The effectiveness, cost, speed, and rarity of cards that are destined to be played mainly in Limited are always carefully considered. Throttle was printed in Khans of Tarkir, which had slower archetypes focused on building up few creatures with +1/+1 counters, filling your graveyard with delve fuel, or waiting for the perfect turn to unload a bunch of smells. They're waiting for the perfect turn to shit on the table and throw it at your opponent. Don't do that when LGS is open again. That's rule number 2, I think, of being a nice Magic player. It's not to shit on your opponent in a literal capacity. Or waiting for the perfect turn to unload a bunch of spells and pump up your entire board. As such, a removal spell that kills 3/4 of all of the creatures in both Khans of Tarkir and Khans of Tarkir plus Fate Reforged Limited can afford to be a little bit pricier in terms of mana cost. Dragons of Tarkir, on the other hand, not only had much faster limited archetypes, Bolster replacing Outlast, Exploit replacing Delve, and even Dash replacing Raid, it had a lot of big evasive creatures in the form of, the dragons. In this environment, the removal that designers wanted you to pick up had to be faster. Throttle may seem like the worst version of a bad version of a good card, and it is, but within the context in which it was designed to be used, it's actually an entirely reasonable spell. Additionally, whether or not a card is actually good or bad depends entirely on how you're applying it. You might think that Mindless Automaton was a waste of a rare slot back in Exodus, but boy howdy does it ever do some disgusting work in my Shrey EDH deck. You may have loathsomely picked up Fairy Seer in your Modern Horizons draft, but to a Pauper Ninja player, this is an absolute cornerstone of their deck. As the old adage goes, one man's jank is another man's combo piece. Okay, these are all reasons why seemingly bad or just less powerful cards have other merits, auxiliary reasons that make them useful additions to the game despite their perceived lack of power. But what about cards that lack these kinds of values that are still mechanically awful? Cards that seemingly exude no feelings apart from disappointment, annoyance, and confusion. What about those cards makes them good despite their badness? Well, what if I told you that sometimes bad cards are made on purpose, and that's a good thing? Part 2, the bad, aka bad cards that are bad on purpose. Genius Sweet Prince and overall S-tier video lad Sam over at Ristic Studies has a phenomenal video on this exact topic. If you haven't watched it yet, then watch it. I didn't write anything in the script for that and I thought I could ad-lib it, but apparently not. Fair play. The broad theme of the piece, one that I agree with, is that bad cards act as a learning tool for new players. When you start playing Magic, you have no idea what things are important to prioritize, both in deck building and in gameplay. When I started playing, for example, the card Indestructibility seemed too good to be true. For only 3 mana, I could effectively ensure that whatever creature I wanted could not be killed, thus surely winning me the game. But as I found out, Indestructibility does not save your creature from being bounced to your hand, being exiled, being tapped down, having its toughness reduced to 0 or below, being sacrificed, or simply your opponent flying over the top of it. Since first playing and growing to understand what mechanics, abilities, and strategies are worth my time to focus on, I've grown as a player. But without playing with bad cards like enchantments that only slightly reduce power or situational counterspells that gain you no tempo, you'll never learn to avoid them as time goes on. Many bad cards exist in order to teach you to avoid them, to teach you to play better. This is a trick designers often pull with rarity as well. A new player may open a pack of cards in Limited, see something like Wild Ricochet at Rare, and think, boy, gee whiz howdy, I could stop my opponent's removal spell and destroy 2 of their creatures at the same time. Then that player will lose 3 matches in a row because they defined their entire draft deck around the very first card they picked, which turned out to be an overexpensive counterspell that they never cast in an effective capacity in any game. They would have done a lot better to have picked up an uncommon Air Servant instead, and now they will remember not to be dazzled by the rarity of a card. At least in Limited, anyway. Rares and Mythics are easily the most played cards in all top-tier constructed decks. I mean, this is one of the many reasons why Magic Arena's wildcard system is grossly inadequate for the reality of deck construction.
Wait a minute! You're part of my unfinished script for why I think that Magic Arena is an imperfect port of physical Magic the Gathering. What are you doing in this video? Oh god. Oh god, he's got a gun! Ah!
This is also an argument for why pre-constructed products like sealed commander decks often come packaged with cards that you'll obviously want to remove and replace immediately. Wizards aren't shorting you by printing bad cards in precons, they're giving you a few easy replacements to make with cards from your own collection. Precons are mainly designed as introductions to the Commander format, so including obvious duds like Bonder's Ornament, Fervent Denial, the entire Kalemny deck list, etc., gives new players ample space to customize and optimize their decks with a few easy and early replacements before they get to the agonizing joy of spending an hour at a time working out what they should cut to make room for a new card before foolishly and inevitably removing yet another land from their already mana-light deck. There are other flavours of purposefully bad cards, however. Sam's video specifically talked about One With Nothing, Magic's best worst card, which lets you discard your entire hand at instant speed for 1 black mana. Players are fascinated by this card, much like the original Tybalt from Avacyn Restored, with skilled players trying desperately to make this bad card work, to break it. When truly, laughably bad cards get printed or reprinted, new players may play them by accident, capable players will have learnt to ignore them, but skilled players will spend countless hours on stream trying to make these pieces of junk functional, like a desperate father who insists he can fix up the original Mini Cooper that he found submerged in the canal last September. Let it go, Richard! Talk to your kids once in a while! They are growing more distant by the day! I won't dwell in this section for too much longer. Sam's video already says all of this and much more with much better production value than I ever could, but what I hope that I've conveyed thus far is that sometimes what you perceive to be bad cards can be good in spite of their badness, but they can also be good because of their badness. This, however, leaves out the final and very real kind of bad cards. What about cards that are unintentionally bad? Part 3, The Ugly, aka bad cards that are bad on accident. Wanna hear a hot gaming industry secret? Come closer. Little closer. Okay, little close. Whoa, geez, not that close. There's a pandemic on, you weirdo. The secret is, sometimes game designers do make mistakes. We're human. We're not perfect. One time, I tried to boil a Christmas bauble because I saw it on Nightmare Before Christmas, but instead of producing a cool green fluorescent glow like in the movie, I just ruined my parents' kettle and almost burnt the house down. Who amongst us hasn't? There are many cards in Magic that designers had intended to be playable which ended up never seeing the harsh fluorescent light of a Magic Fest tournament, and other cards that ended up dominating formats that nobody expected them to. Magic's very early sets had cards like this in spades. Alpha's rare slots were taken up both by cards like Ancestral Recall and Black Lotus, as well as cards like Animate Wall and Sunglasses of Urza. Sam's got another video about these kinds of instances within Magic's game design as it pertains to Siege Rhino in Khans of Tarkir Standard. And oh look, he brings up a Sam Stoddard article in this one too. Wow, who needs breadth of opinion when you could just exclusively reference the work of 2 guys? Remember when I put actual effort into my videos? But whilst there will always be mistakes in game design, I think it's important to give game designers the benefit of the doubt when it comes to seemingly over or underpowered cards getting printed. The thing about Magic is that with new mechanics, themes, and power levels being explored in each new set, what was junk today can be a must-have piece tomorrow. Now, whilst I want the bulk of this video to focus on cards that people generally perceive as bad in terms of lacking power and playability, it would be a mistake not to at least touch on those cards that are bad by virtue of being so good they end up hurting the game. But how do you know when a card like that was a mistake, aside from just waiting it out and seeing? Well, a card's appearance on the banned and restricted list is usually a pretty clear indicator of when a card exceeds its bounds. Even this, however, is an imperfect way of working out whether or not a so good they're bad card is an actual mistake. Very old cards like Mox Emerald were printed years before competitive Magic was even a twinkle in Richard Garfield's eyes, and so it's pretty difficult to say they were mistakes
per se. Additionally, a more recent card like Lutri the Spell Chaser was banned in Commander before Ikoria had even been released, due to the fact that in that specific format, it would have been an auto-include in almost any deck that ran blue and red. That isn't to say the card itself was a mistake, only that it would have been too powerful in that specific format. Broadly speaking, however, if it takes a few months or weeks for a card to get banned, that's probably a good indicator that, yes, indeed, maybe, just maybe, Oko might actually be a little bit too good of a card. This being said, the designers of Magic are pretty open about when cards go wrong. There are a number of articles on the mothership that you can read which are effectively transcripts of the designers tweaking cards during development, complete with annotations and reasoning. There's also an article by Brian Hawley specifically about the lessons learned from Oko, and it's a very insightful read if you are a budding game designer. After all, without error, there can be no innovation, and experimentation really is one of the major reasons why cards end up being accidentally bad. As Hawley writes, the design team adopted a new design philosophy from Guilds of Ravnica onwards, and were exploring a quote-unquote riskier space for Constructed. Oko, and the set that he was printed in, are described very much as the high end of power in Standard going forward, but I would argue that without taking the risk and creating such a powerful set with many cards that could be and are considered mistakes, Magic's designers would be less sure of their limits as time goes on. Now those designers will be able to produce more experimental cards with the hindsight of what made their last experiments a problem. But without failed experiments, you'll never have successful ones. That's right, I'm making the argument that cards being accidentally bad is still good for the game. You can't argue with my logic. I am beyond your reasoning. That being said, Magic is a physical card game, and what that means is that mistakes aren't easily rectified, or at least aren't elegantly rectified. To explain what I mean, digital card games like Legends of Runeterra and Hearthstone can easily patch over or underpowered cards however they wish after they've already come out. Magic, on the other hand, really only has access to banning and restricting cards outright, which is an imperfect solution. The binary positions of banned and unbanned leave very little room for nuance. Now, this works fine for dealing with cards that are so broken that they destroy a game or they destroy a particular format, but it becomes a lot more touch and go when you're dealing with cards that are very powerful, but where banning them seems to be a bit of an overreaction. Personally, I'm a big fan of how Canadian Highlander manages this problem. Instead of banning cards, they instead have a points system, meaning that there's a hard limit placed on how many especially problem cards you can run in a deck. Magic itself also did manage to sidestep their usual blanket ban quite recently with a pretty smart solution. See, sometimes cards get errated or reworded, like how Oubliette's wording was simplified from all of this gubbins to just target creature faces out, but rarely do cards see their fundamental mechanics altered through errata. However, when many of the companion cards from Ikoria began dominating the meta, Wizards errated their mechanic from letting them be cast from the command zone if your deck met a specific requirement, to you also now having to pay an additional 3 mana of any colour first, only during your turn, to then put the companion into your hand. This has led to companion decks functioning much more fairly now in comparison to the nightmare world of early Ikoria Standard. It means that people can still play with the cards and make fun decks without brutalizing their friends and fellow players, turning bad, overpowered pieces into fair and powerful cards. It's a shame that even with this change, however, Lutri is still banned in Commander, and that's why I'm creating my own format, utterly different to Commander, so that I can play with my sparkly boy. Wait, what was that? Rules set by the Rules Committee are meant to be viewed as a broad baseline, and I'm free to change or optimize them as I and my playgroup sees fit? No.
No, that can't be right. No, I need an authority to tell me what cards I can and cannot play. My illusions about the necessity of hierarchy are toxifying my ability to appreciate a piece of entertainment media. Someone, quick, pass me my emergency copy of Atlas Shrugged. I'm dangerously close to freely experiencing joy. So, yes, sometimes problem cards do get printed in Magic on accident. And yes, those problem cards can have huge ramifications for the game as a whole, and yes, the game as a whole doesn't have a perfect system for dealing with those problem cards, but there are still benefits to having busted cards continue to get printed in Magic. Think of each new expansion in Magic, or each new expansion in whatever your favourite game is, a lot like a new album by an artist that you like. I, for example, wasn't a massive fan of Clipping's There Existed an Addiction to Blood. However, a lot of the themes and ideas they experimented with in that album directly fed into my favourite album of theirs, Visions of Bodies Being Burned, which is a colossal banger. Much in the same capacity that the lessons learned from Oko and Fires of Invention will inform future games designers when they want to create other 3-mana planeswalkers or game warping enchantments. We will be able to have better versions of those cards in the future because of the mistakes of the past. So, as I hope this video has helped you understand, there are lots of reasons why quote-unquote bad cards continue to get printed in Magic the Gathering. Sometimes they are genuine mistakes, but oftentimes they are tools meant to be used to teach you to be a better player. And sometimes they're not really bad cards at all. They have hidden value and applications beyond what you first perceived them to have when you tried to evaluate the card when first you saw it. So next time you come across a quote-unquote bad cards and you think, well, who is this for? Maybe think a little harder, look a little deeper, and you might just uncover a little gem of value and joy in these little cardboard rectangles. And I was going to finish off the video by saying, but if you play with Opposition Agent, which is just a bad card, then fuck you. But it actually got lost in the big pile of draft chaff that I have accrued over the years, which I think is broadly thematically cool. I like that. I do hope I find it though, because it is quite an expensive card, and I would not like to have destroyed it accidentally. That's how I'm ending the video. Yeah, it's my channel, I can do what I want. I'm going to go to the credits now. This has been so uncomfortable to lie on for like 20 minutes. These are sharp! A massive thank you to everybody who lent their voice to this video. This includes Sam over at Ristic Studies, reading the part of Sam Stoddard. Get it? Sam. Anyway. Cosmonaut Marcus, who read the flavor text on Elderleaf Mentor. And H Bomber Guy, who played the part of Bruce Tarl. Go and follow all of these people and watch their stuff. They're all very, very good. I'm going to be honest, you probably already heard of all of them, but you never know. Go have a good time. They're lovely, lovely humans. And a massive thank you to all of the people who support me on Patreon and make this wild ride that is my channel my full-time job, which is pretty nice and cool. Thanks for helping me pay rent. Without you, I would not be doing this. Wow, I'm really good at ad-libbing, I'm finding as I record these. Anyway, a massive thank you to my Patreons, and a big old thank you to my $10 patrons, who include 1, 2, 3, 4, I Declare a Class War, 7th Guest, A Fool of 5 Colours, A Gay American Couple, A Socialist Hobgoblin, Adam Gable, Addy DC, AJ Ingram, Alex Berman, Alex Flynn, Alex Wood, Alice Paralis, an alt-right sleeper agent who gives money to communists because Idika probably Tybalt's Persona, an Umbreon Pastry, Anthony Baker, Anthony G. Reap, Avery is a good Magic player, C. Joe, the thespian said it, now it's true, stop making fun of me, Bambi Ward, Basu Gatsu, oh god, sorry, I keep getting this wrong, Basu Gasu Baku Hatsu Baku Matsu, Ben Pike, Biscuit Blade, Blake Ethers, Bradley Rose, Brian Dunn, Cairns, Kalulu, Carl Comstock, Chase Beard, Chad X, Chris DeVos, Surso Saressa, Cloud Chaser Kestrel, Cognitive Glitch, Conflicted Psyches, Drew Pierce, Dystopico, Exidian, Eldritch Changeling, Alfonzi, Erica Hamel, Ethan Abraham, Felix Morton, Fiona Perry, Fofa, Future Beagle, Grey Days, Hand It Over, That Thing, Your Dog Pictures, Hoop It Up, Hypercube MTG. I am saying this only because our global economic system does not intrinsically support artistic expression. I want Emrakul to dominate me. In response, I bolt myself. What a charming grouping of names there. Is It Even Metal If No Goats Were Sacrificed? Jake Colburn, Jessica Settle, Joe Benson, Joey Den Breuder, Johnny Rifle, Joshua M. Steffen, Julie Bunn, Julius Home, Just Mild Lilac, Carlia Whithart, Kate B, Kevin Quinn, Kurdape Apologizer, Kyle Van Linden, Leliana, Lily of the North Star, Literally a Ghost That Pushes Over Candles, Linnea, Madame Monroe, Magic Arcanum, Matthew Borries, Max Cooper, Mike Mavramatis, Mr. Skolaton, N. Ben, Omar Alviberi, Oops All Signy, Ori, Riddle of Lightning, Ross King, Rowan Brown, Ryan Morgan, Sage Morrison, Samuel Kona, Sasha Evelyn Francis, Sean Kais O'Reilly, Several Goblins in a Trenchcoat, Shimmering Gloom, Silent Celine, Sir Shaunsey, Sky Johnson, Sodaman 64, Squimbus, that's a new one, sorry that Squimbus! Oh, you all have such wonderful names. Swan Hunter, Taylor Street, The Ghost of Karl Marx in 4D, Thelon, Reaper of You, Totally a Spy, Trans Rights Baby, Trey Ernst, Trey Parker, True Lily, Vasmeth, Venser, Vittorio Grace, Vladimir Gorvikov, Voice of All, Wesley, That Dang Communist, Wicked Haiku, Xenon, Zadda's Ludo Narrative Dissonance, and Xanoron. And thank you to all of my other fantastic patrons. Some of them you can see on the screen now. You too can join this list of names, or just come hang out on the Discord server where people just like share cool stories and pictures, and we all hang out, and it's a dandy old time. Head over to patreon.com/Spice8Rack and continue to support my quote unquote work. But yeah, that's everything. Be good people, and as always, stay spicy.